Hi, and on this very short video I'm just going to cover glazing very briefly in its more simple form. You can glaze in many ways, you can use lots of different mediums, but the way I usually use glazing is just to make minor adjustments to colours on my finished paintings, or what's nearly a finished painting. And this lion I've recently finished, and I'm just going to glaze just here and there on certain areas, perhaps the face, the mane, and some of the grasses, and I'm just going to use it just to punch up the colours a little bit, nothing more than that. So the painting's dry because I use alkyd oils. They dry by the next morning, or at least very touch dry, so you can glaze on top of it. And the glazing medium I'm going to be using is by M. Graham, and it's walnut alkyd medium. It's quite liquidy but not like water, and that's all I'm going to use. You could use liquid as well. They're both very similar because they're alkyd based. They dry really quick. So I'm just putting a little bit in a glass jar. You can see it at the bottom. And on my palette I've put a few colours I'm going to use on my glass palette, and all I'm going to do is just use my brush to take a little amount of that medium, put it on my palette, and then this is raw sienna, and you can see it thins it down or makes it transparent, or pretty much transparent. So I can then use that to go over my painting, and it kind of acts like almost like a stained glass window effect. So it's just colouring over the top, so you can still see all the details underneath. It's covering nothing of that, but you can see I was just slightly warming the colours. Now you could paint in a complete black and white tonal painting and then use glazing to add all the colours, but I never really paint like that at all. I just use it to make these slight adjustments. So I may want to warm an area with some perhaps burnt sienna thinned with the walnut medium, or I could cool it down with perhaps some blue. And because the underpainting's dry, as you just seen then, I took a bit of kitchen tissue, just wiped an area off with a colour I didn't like. Didn't disturb the underneath whatsoever because it's dry enough not to come off, and it's really easy to do that, make the minor adjustments so you know you're not going to ruin anything. So I don't know how much of this you're going to pick up on the camera, but I'm just adding some burnt sienna, burnt umber mixed with that alkyd medium, and I put that in the dark areas of the mane just to add a bit of warmth in there, and also up in these sections as well. Just see us go in that slight reddy colour. I can use it as well with black, and the less medium you put in, obviously the more opaque it's going to be. And remember also that some paints such as white are pretty much completely opaque, and then other paints such as raw sienna are more transparent naturally anyway. So it's more of the transparent type of colours you'd want to be using with glazing. Otherwise you've got to add so much glaze there may not even be hardly any colour left, or so much medium just to make it see-through. So here I'm making up a brown one. I'm not too bothered if it's slightly opaque because I want to darken some of these areas in the mane. See, gently brushing in the fur direction, and that's just adding some warmth into this darker area. And a little bit darker on the bottom as well. So as you can see, just minor adjustments. And a little bit darker under this chin area also. Now I find I use this more on things like tigers. So a tiger is usually yellows and orange colours, so those colours are not necessarily that opaque. So I find sometimes then it's difficult to get the vibrancy of the colour I want, especially in sunlit tigers. So that's when I'd start to come in with the glazes to really get those punchy colours. And also on things like peacocks, where they've got a very vibrant blue and green, that's where it'd be pretty much essential to do this glaze in there as well, just to get that real vibrancy of colour. Now on the body of the lion, the colours are pretty much accurate as I want it, and they're opaque colours anyway, so there's not a great deal to do on there. But I can still use it for darkening areas with the glazers. So there, you can see it, that's just colorized it just slightly. Now I'm creating a bit of a darker mix, so I've got that lamp black, plenty of medium as you can see, and now I'm just going to darken some areas on the body, make it look a little bit more aged and not so perfect. So you see, the harder I push with the brush, or the firmer I am with the brush, the darker the mark I'm putting on there. Don't want to overdo it, it's not needed everywhere. But see, you can still see the details underneath where I'm going over. Now I'm just going to do a small amount on these foreground grasses, so just a bit of raw sienna in there, and that's just warming that colour up. Got a larger bristle brush. I'm still doing the same raw sienna, the alkyd medium on that glass palette. And you can see it just tinting it, it's just warming up the areas. And it's still keeping the tones under there, the darks and the lights, and you can still see the darker bluish areas I've got in the grasses, they stay in there, so I haven't got to worry about changing the colour of this glaze all the time. It's still keeping the variety there that was already there before I put the glaze on. It's just warming it up, warming the foreground up slightly. I'm not going to do too much of it, I don't want it to overpower everything. And I've just added a touch of Windsor red to that mix, very very small amount, and that's just warming up this background very very slightly. I'm not even sure that you'll pick it up on screen, but I can see it with my eyes only just, so it's just slightly warming it up. Very very thin layer. And that's all that I really need to do with the glazing on this particular piece. So all I then wanted to do was to add some very very fine whiskers, so almost no paint on my brush at all, and they're barely visible because this painting is so small. Then there's not going to be any thick very white whiskers at all, so just the smallest suggestion of them there to finish the painting. If you're looking for more art resources, I've really got you covered. I've got a dedicated tutorial website, that's jasonmorgan.co.uk, lots of videos on there, ebook tutorials, you name it, it's on that site. I've got a Patreon art channel, so every month I put up brand new videos, and that could be pastel videos, oils, charcoals, they're full-length videos, and there's also photo references with the Easy Trace line art on there. I've got quite a few hundred people supporting me, and that's on Patreon. And also, if you're after even more reference photos, I got a dedicated website just packed with reference photos. I think there's about 900 on there at the moment. So that's wildlifeart-online.com. Now please, with my YouTube channel, new videos coming on here as well. If you can possibly subscribe to the channel, then you're never going to miss out on new videos.